Hello and welcome to my video on how to do dimensions and constraints. So dimensioning and constraining is basically how you create shapes. So I'm going to start with a sketch, and I already turned off all the work planes, but I'm going to start on top. And I'm going to look at the top using my view cube over here. And what I want to explain, so I'm going to start with a rectangle, a center point rectangle. So I'm going to start here in the middle. So the constraint that I just created is a link to this point. So if I hold my cursor over there, you can see that it has what's called a coincident link, or if I go up here, it's coincident. So the center of this rectangle is now at this origin point on my shape. So these are what dictate the way the drawing works. Okay, I can click on Show Constraints, and it shows me the constraints, and I'll explain these as we go around. But you can show them and close them and everything. So I have created my rectangle, and I haven't finished my rectangle because I haven't given it dimensions. A dimension is a constraint, and what that means is it's telling the exact size of different sizes of the object. So over here it says 3.116. I haven't clicked on anything, I'm just holding my cursor there. And now I'm going to make this a 3 by 3 cube, or not cube, rectangle, which is also a square. So I'm holding my cursor here, and I'm going to hit 3 and hit enter. Okay, now let's say I didn't make my dimensions because I accidentally clicked. I can go back up here and I can add those dimensions. Okay, so this is my 3-inch dimension and my 3-inch dimension. Okay, so let's go around and look at what constraints we have around our object. Okay, we have this, which tells us, which is this one right here, so midpoint. So this is the midpoint of, so if you wanted to have like some sort of a extension that goes across this, there's a midpoint and a midpoint. So a midpoint, once I hold it, it's the midpoint of this line and this line. So it's halfway in between them. And then if I go here, it is a midpoint between this line and this line. So it's saying that it's midpoint, midpoint. So it's dead center, and then it is linked to this. Okay, now going around, this is a perfect square. So this is equal to this, and this is equal to this. Okay, we also have a one right here that is called, if I go up here, it's called perpendicular. Okay, so this center is perpendicular to the center point. Okay, it's also saying that it's perpendicular to this line, which is making that this is equal to this, and so that's what makes it a rectangle and a square. Okay, so that is how we dimension. I'm going to show you one more type of dimension, and I'm also going to show you how to trim. So I have this here. I created an angled line, and I'm going to come up here to my trim tool, and I'm going to trim this, and I'm going to trim this. And so what happens is that little section disappears, and now I have 3 different kinds of dimensions. This is called an angled line, but it is made up of polar coordinates, which means that I either have a distance and an angle, or I have 2 distances. So I can set this 2 different ways. I can say it has a distance here, and I'm going to click on dimension also, and I have a dimension to here. Oops, I didn't hit dimension. So from here to here, and this gives me an angle. Okay, so I can set that angle, let's say 135. Okay, and I can set my distance at, let's say, 2. Okay, now this is a polar coordinate. This has a distance, or I'm sorry, a distance and an angle. The other way I can do this is to create 2 rectangular dimensions. So this is going to have, whenever I click on this, it only gives me an aligned dimension. If I click on this and then I click on, let's do that again, I click on the dot and the dot, this gives me an aligned dimension. It gives me a vertical dimension and a horizontal dimension. So in order to tell what this angle is, I can do a dimension in this direction, and I can do, I'm clicking on the dots here, and a dimension in, oops, I keep forgetting to click on it. And I can set a dimension this direction. So then let's say I know that this is 2 and this is 1. I don't know what the angle dimension is. I can find that out, but when I do that, you'll see that this shows up as, come on, that's not what I wanted. Let's go to dimension. I'll select this and this line, and this gives me an angle dimension. So let's say 45, but see how it turned red? What it's saying is it is now what's called over-constrained. So this and this dictate the angles. So it's the same thing. I know that this distance is 2 and this is 3, so 3 minus 2 is 1. But if I put a dimension here, this now, I say 1, see how it's grayed out? That is a forced dimension. If I change this to 1, it forces that to 2. It has to be 2 because my width between here and here is 3, which leaves that as our over-constrained, or what's called a driven dimension. This is a driving dimension. This is a driven dimension. So that is my full lesson on dimensioning and constraints. Okay? Thank you for listening.